Yes, it has. It has changed over time. The principles were first created by SGH coming out of the global financial crisis. We identified the need to focus our investing on companies that displayed sustainable investing principles. We saw so many instances from companies displaying poor governance practices, poor environmental practices, for example, before the GFC. And so we felt the need to just invest in companies that were sustainable and going forward as well. So we looked around and decided to adopt the guidelines from the Australian Council of Superannuation Investors and also the Principles for Responsible Investment. So they formed the very first principles that we looked at in 2010, and the idea was to fully integrate those into the investment process over the next 5 to 10 years, and that's been done now. And the thing that has changed over time is that we have seen benefits. We've seen companies that display strong sustainable investing practices or sustainable practices, they tend to perform well over time. So there's a shareholder benefit as well from this. Well, firstly, we believe as professional investors, we have a social responsibility to all stakeholders of companies that we invest in. So it's not just enough to invest in a company purely for the total return that you get from the share price and the dividends. You've also got to look at how companies generate that return. Are they looking after their customers, their staff, the workers in the supply chain, the environment? Are they displaying good governance practices and so on? So it's important to look at the whole chain of stakeholders. We also believe that by doing this, that companies that display these practices, that have good governance, that look after the environment and all the stakeholders, they tend to perform well over the long term because they are truly sustainable businesses. And ethically, we think this is the right thing to do. As good corporate citizens, we want to ensure that the companies we invest in look after all their stakeholders as well. The next steps in the journey are, firstly, we are becoming a signatory for the Principles for Responsible Investment, the PRI. That's happening in 2021, and that is formalising the process that we adopted in 2010. We're going to formally adopt their principles that we have integrated into our investment process. So that's the first thing. The second thing we want to do is more clearly communicate how we invest and how we adopt the principles inside our full investment process, and that's going to be something that we do over the course of this year as well. And finally, we want to continue to work with the companies we invest in to make sure that they are looking after all their stakeholders, all their company, their customers, their staff, the shareholders obviously, but also the environment and those sort of important factors. We want to work with companies to make sure they're continuing to improve their practices as well.